everyone, this is Tamara from shelfaddiction.com and welcome to episode 140. Tonight on Book Chat, I'm talking with author Will Damron about his new YA fantasy adventure book, The Tercentennial Baron. He's an award-winning audiobook narrator who has recorded books in almost every genre, from fantasy to sci-fi to YA, romance, thriller, nonfiction, and even literary fiction. His narration work has earned him multiple AudioFile Magazine Earphone Awards, 2 Voice Arts Awards, and an Audie Award. Will's social media links are below in the show notes, so if you'd like to connect, you know where to find him. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and share it. Show your support by rating the podcast and leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts or your listening app of choice. If you'd like to comment on something you hear during today's episode, please tweet at me on Twitter at shelfaddiction. If you'd like to email any feedback or questions, feel free to reach out to me at info@shelfaddiction.com or call in and leave an internet voice message via SpeakPipe. The link is below in the show notes. Hey, Will, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So you're on the West Coast, huh?
I'm in the West Coast. I'm in North Hollywood.
Oh, fabulous. So it's not really fall there, huh?
It's not fall at all here, much to my and my fiance's dismay. It's actually in the 90s here.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it sucks. This is actually, for some strange reason, this is the hottest time of year in our part of California. It's just like late September, early October. It's the worst. So you're like trick or treating. Like, you don't want to put on a lot of clothes to trick or treat because it's crazy hot.
Oh, that's dreadful. I'm sorry, that's dreadful.
We miss the fall because we're both from the East Coast. I'm from the South, and my fiance is from Pennsylvania. Yeah. So we really miss that.
I bet, because it's really nice here right now.
I'll bet it is.
Yes.
Rub it in.
Sorry. So let's just jump into it if you're ready to do that.
I would love to. Thank you very much for having me on, by the way. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. So let's kick things off with what you're reading right now or listening to, since, you're an audiobook narrator as well.
As a narrator, I don't have nearly as much time as I would like to read for pleasure. I mean, right beside my bed right now, I'm still working my way through Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Which I'm loving and I'm like taking my time with, and so that's my fun reading is like more Harry Potter because I never get tired of Harry Potter, and I'm a total nerd about it.
Cool.
But then there's the books, the books that I'm recording because so much time and preparation goes into that. I just finished a book that's a post-apocalyptic kind of adventure set in South Africa called Fever. By Dion Meyer, and I'm doing another one just today that's totally other end of the spectrum. It's a nonfiction book about small towns fighting for their environmental rights in Italy.
Wow. So I've got to ask, since you have to prepare for a recording, how many times do you read a book before you start recording it?
Oh, once.
Once?
I mean, and sometimes even then I'm just able to skim parts of it. I'll read as much as I can, but because the schedule, my schedule is so packed with books, I'll read it. I might get someone's help to just write down character information for me. Mm-hmm. So I'll certainly, read the book, but you don't have time to. You want to allow for some spontaneity when you're performing it in the booth. So I don't want to get too much into it beforehand. But you got to know the story, and you got to know, words that you need help pronouncing and that kind of thing. So, at least half of your time, probably more, that you would think goes into just recording the book. All the rest of that is preparation, research, talking to the author, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that sounds pretty extensive.
It's pretty extensive. It's a lot of work, and it means that I don't get out very often. My fiance and I live in a really nice part of North Hollywood, and my sister was actually just here, and that was like a breath of fresh air because we really had to go out and go to coffee, or like drive around LA. Like we never get to do that anymore. It's kind of crazy.
Like actually leave the house and
leave the house, and then when I'm not doing that, I'm writing a book. So I'm completely indoors, way more than I would like to be. I'm trying to get out more.
Well, it's 90 degrees. You don't want to get out more right now.
That's true. Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, since you don't read a lot, I assume you have some favorite authors, right?
Oh,
That maybe,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
I would read more. I have a stack of things I'd like to continue reading. One of the last things I read that I loved was I'm working my way through Ransom Riggs's series, the peculiar children's series.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I really, really love that. But I'm sorry. What was your question about reading?
No worries. Who are some favorite authors of yours?
Favorite authors. Oh my God. Where to begin? The ones that really inspired me with this book, The Tercentennial Baron, is definitely J.K. Rowling. Neil Gaiman. There's quite a bit of Neil Gaiman in there, I feel like. And kind of the classics that I grew up with. I mean, Robert Louis Stevenson. I'm kind of a throwback that way. Like I would still read, Treasure Island. That would be on my list if I could squeeze it in.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Those are some of the main ones.
Mm-hmm. So when I was reading your bio, it looks like you wrote this book before you started being an audiobook narrator. Is that right?
Yeah, I started it long before. This has been an 8-year process. Make sure I have that math right. Yeah, it was late 2009. It's exactly 8 years. But late 2009 that I started writing the book. And I didn't start doing audiobooks until 2013. So I've literally it's been twice as long I've been working on my book as I've been narrating other people's books, which is one reason why it's taken so long. I've had a couple of different careers while I've been working on this book, and I would periodically have to set it aside because, audiobooks would be taking off for me, and, I wanted to focus on that for a month or two. So, yeah,
Wow.
It's been with me for a while.
Okay. So that's kind of cool, that you never gave up on it and you finished the book and here we are,
Yeah, it was never a question for me, though. And it's funny that you say that because a lot of people say that to me, like, wow, I can't believe you stuck it out. And I'm just sort of like, well, yeah, it's, once I dove into the story, I couldn't not see it to completion. And the last couple of years really have been less about the story of the book and more about, pitching it, submitting it, and learning about the business of being an author. And what that entails. So the latest part of it has really just been kind of learning from the other side of the table.
Okay.
And also as a narrator. I mean, I kind of have this weird job where, I was trained as an actor. Now I narrate audiobooks, and I'm also a writer. So I sort of found my way into the publishing business as an actor. And now I've got this book that is happening.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. So tell me, did you go the traditional route or did you self-publish or small press? How did you?
Excuse me. This is a self-published book. I tried the traditional route because it seemed like a no-brainer to me. I was, young and naive and kind of arrogant. It was like, everyone's going to want this book. And because it's a big story. It's an epic story. It seems very sort of cinematic to me. And what I quickly found out, and I pitched this to many agents in person and via email, which is sort of the typical agent querying process. I had friends put it in front of people for me. I talked to editors. I mean, anyone you can mention in the business. I worked every angle I could. And what I quickly realized was nobody else, none of those professionals seemed to be able to figure out a way to sell the story. Because that's, of course, their job. They're not creative people. Their job is to take what you give them and try to help both of you make some money off of it and turn it into a business. And my story it didn't fit a mold for them because it's about this 13-year-old boy who then meets a 300-year-old supernatural warrior. So then they're like, okay, so who's the main character? And I'm sort of like, well, it's kind of both of them. It's really the boy, but more of the book is about the man because you sort of go back in time and hear his story, and they couldn't really wrap their head around that. And then and then they said it was too long for middle grade audiences. It's more of a YA book, but it's sort of upper middle grade. And that was my personal favorite reason because any young reader that I've given this to, and I've had several young beta readers, in the age group around the 13, 14-year-olds, they want more. I mean, it's not like a 700-page book. It's a 380-page book.
That's regular.
That's what I said. But you got to remember, they're looking at it from a totally business standpoint, and it's risk averse, and they're not. It would take a lot for them to take a chance on me with that kind of material that is just, they couldn't figure out how to sell it. And so, long story short, I ended up with over 75 rejections. And at that point, I said, okay, do I just want to do this myself? Do I want to keep banging my head against this door? And I'd been thinking about self-publishing for a while. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked a number of things about it, mainly that I could be in control of the product.
Right.
I could control the cover design. I could control how it's marketed, because that's one kind of horror story that I heard from many people in traditional publishing is, you get a publisher to buy your book and that's what you want and they're going to distribute it. And then they put no marketing force behind it, which is the whole reason you want them in the first place. Yeah. And your book dies on the shelves after 6 months and you don't have any rights with it at that point.
Yeah, they have their favorites. So, they throw the money where they want to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the business. I don't necessarily, I don't mean to be complaining about that. I'm just saying I saw that happening to other people and I read the stories and I said, you know what? I'd at least like to know that I gave it all I could with me being in the pilot seat.
Right.
So that's where we are.
Well, sounds like a good choice. I mean, it looks like it works for you. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I know a lot of self-published authors that totally have zero regrets about self-publishing and they love it. So
it's a lot more work. It's a lot more work, but I like having that kind of ownership of the material.
Mm-hmm. So this book is, you called it a YA book, right? That's where you would place it?
If I had to place it in terms of, most often I call it a fantasy adventure book, but if I had to place it in terms of an age group, I would say lower YA, upper middle grade, because the main character is 13, but he's dealing with a little more, he's not, there's no super graphic violence or sex in it, so it's not sort of like strongly YA, but it's a little too old for middle grade, so it's in between.
Mm-hmm. So it's fantasy adventure, but do other genres touch this? Like it's a little bit. Is there any time travel in it with someone that's 500 years old? I mean,
it depends. It's not. I say no because it's time travel in the way that like Interview with a Vampire was time travel. It's someone telling their story. And then when they're telling their story, you're back in time with them. But that main character, Percival, the 13-year-old boy who's hearing the story, he's not there back. He's not, visiting the past with the guy. It then just becomes the guy's story for a couple of chapters.
Right.
So it definitely has some more paranormal in it because it's sort of ghosts and demons and stuff, but set in the modern world. And the parts in the past are set very much in real, actual history. That's part of the fun thing about the book is you get to see this being, this 300-year-old supernatural being, the Tercentennial Baron, show up at famous events in Scottish history, and he took part in them. That's part of his journey.
That's cool. So the Baron, what made you choose? I think is the 17th century to put some of his story.
That's a good question. I wanted to cover sort of all my favorite parts of Scottish history, and a lot of his story parallels the Jacobite rebellions in Scotland, which if you or any of your listeners have seen the Outlander series or read the Outlander books, you'll know a bit about that. Yeah. That deals with the later Jacobite things, but the Jacobite conflict, without getting into it because it's incredibly complicated, but it was a very intense struggle in that country from the late 1600s to the mid 1700s. And I realized I could kind of have his journey parallel a bit of that because, he's a rebellious figure himself. So, and also I thought the costumes of the 17th century were really cool, and I just wanted to imagine him in that context.
That's really nice. So because the history and all of that? Did you do a lot of research, or are you a history buff and you just knew all of this?
Both. I'm a big history buff. I actually, my last acting job before I came to California I was a historical interpreter, an actor at Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. Which I don't know if you know, it's a fully recreated historic town where, Washington and Jefferson and all those guys kind of got their start. So we had like a show we did with Washington and Jefferson and all those guys. So you had to learn a lot of history. So I've always been into that. But for this book, I did a ton of research, talked to a lot of people, kind of right up until the last couple of months. Some of my best Scottish research didn't come until this past January and February, like just this year. So it was sort of an ongoing thing, but I've always loved history.
Okay. And what made you use Scotland as the place?
It's a good question, because I'm not sure if I even remember. I came up with this idea for the book back in high school, because it kind of began as a frustration with other books that I was seeing out there. Everyone seemed to be writing about vampires and werewolves. And this was before Twilight or any of that. I just sort of said, can nobody come up with any other, supernatural beings? So I wanted to make one myself. And that's where this being, who is the Tercentennial Baron, came about, this thing called a Bellerolt. And for Scotland, I knew a little bit about Scottish history, and I sort of, I knew about sort of the violence that's in their history and kind of their constant searching for a national identity, and that kind of reflected or mirrored what I thought this character was searching for, because it's, his 300-year-long journey is a lot about a journey of himself, trying to become himself and learn about himself and find his place in this, new supernatural world that he's a part of. And, there's so much wonderful drama in Scottish history. And you have the landscapes and, all the battles that have been fought there. And I just thought it was a rich backdrop for the story.
Yeah. So, okay. So you did mention that, the kid is 13 years old and you kind of place it in that YA/middle grade arena. But do you think this is a book that us adults can enjoy as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's sort of in the way that, we enjoy Harry Potter, or I know I do. And it was partly reading Harry Potter after college, because I didn't read it till after college. That's how, inundated I was with, work in college. But it was reading it after college that made me want to write this story. Of all the stories that I had in my head, I wanted to sort of explore this one. And so I'm in my 20s at that point. And I feel that it doesn't mean you can't enjoy a book, where the character starts out at 11 years old.
Right.
You have a grander perspective for what they're going through. And you pick up on things, symbolically and thematically in the books that you wouldn't as a kid.
Oh, totally.
So absolutely. Yeah. And there's quite a bit of that in this book. So I think adults will love this book. Awesome.
So the Tercentennial Baron is the first in a series. How much do you have planned for this series?
I have 2 more books planned for Percival's journey. And I'm not ruling out that there may be, we'll see what I feel like and what readers are interested in, but there's definitely room for offshoots from that. I could see doing side stories of other major characters in the series, because you're dealing with so much history, and I think there's a lot of room for their stories to be explored as well. But in this initial frame of the story, 3 books total is what I'm looking at.
So I take it you're a planner, not what do you call it, a pantser? Is that right?
Is that a pantser?
Is that what the authors call themselves? Plotters or pantsers?
I've never heard of that. What does that mean? You just fly by the seat of your pants?
Yeah. So you either plot it with planning, or you just go by the seat of your pants.
I'm definitely a plotter and a planner. I have to. I mean, to me, if you're dealing with anything that's sort of a mystery story, which is what this is in a lot of ways, it's a 300-year-long mystery and full of clues and symbols. there has to be planning because you got to know what you're planting the seed for to have it show up later in the story. But I will say this: I've become a bit less of a planner as I've gone through the edits of the book, because I've realized that the story needs to sort of pull me along. I can't try to control too much of it, because then it reads that way, right? I'm sure you've read books like that where you can feel the author kind of like holding on to it and like trying to make it be something rather than just sort of letting it be something. Yeah.
Like I've totally heard lots of authors say, I wanted this to happen, but the characters wouldn't let me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you want a funny tidbit, I rewrote the beginning of this book at least 10 times.
Wow.
And I don't mean like edit, like I rewrote it. Like I went back to chapter 1 and just redid it, like chapters 1 through, 5. Because I couldn't figure out, I kept trying to figure out what the characters wanted and what the best way was to, and I was also trying to make it fit into a form that I thought I could sell to, agents and whatnot, because I still wasn't, represented or anything at that point. And so I was trying to make it fit something rather than letting it be what these characters just needed it to be. So I absolutely agree with that.
Well, good. I mean, I'm kind of glad to hear that. So then I know that when I do get to listen to the audiobook, I know that it will be its own story and not what, you forced it to be. That's kind of good to hear.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
awesome.
And Tim Gerard Reynolds, who I hired to narrate the book, did a phenomenal job. I mean, he's quite adept at these long form kind of epic fantasy books, and he was just a dream.
I listened to him on the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown, and I thought he was stellar. So
I haven't listened to that, but several of my friends have, and when they found out that he was doing my book, they said, "You mean the Red Rising? Oh my God! Oh, he's good."
Yeah, he is. So how did you pick him, though? Like, what was the process that, obviously you picked them since you're doing everything yourself. So,
well, I knew I didn't want to do it because that's one thing all my narrator friends said. Well, oh, you're going to narrate it, right? And I was like, no, I'm too American. I wanted someone who is sort of the British Isles to do the narration. And Tim is Irish, but he narrates most often in an English accent. So I knew him. I knew him around our audiobook circle, the audiobook world. Actual narrators who do a lot of books and do this for a living, there are not very many of us, and we all know each other. And so I'd met him. We'd just sort of passed each other, and there were very, very, very few people whose voices I thought would be what I imagined for this story, and it really wasn't a hard choice. I had to make sure I got on his radar early because he's a very, very busy man. But
I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, good choice. I started, I think I got 2 chapters in, and I enjoyed him thus far. So good stuff.
That's a good start.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So is there anything else you'd like to share about this book before we do the lightning round?
Oh, boy. I really just believe that there's something in this book that just about anyone who enjoys fiction will enjoy. Whether you get the audiobook or the print version or Kindle or whatever, because it's got it has kind of that Harry Potter coming of age story aspect through kind of a world of magic. It's got history. It's got Scottish history. It's got romance. It's at the very least, I think everyone will find it a very fun, adventurous read, and at the most, I think you'll find parts of it deeply moving. So I really hope people enjoy it.
Okay. Well, you guys, you can find all the buy links below in the show notes for the Tercentennial Baron, and you can also find Will's social media links below, so feel free to connect with him on social media if you like. All of that's below as usual. And we're going to jump into the lightning round now. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the only rule is you have to choose. You can't say neither and you can't say both. You have to choose.
And I'm not giving any explanation. I'm just saying one or the other.
Because you want to do as many as you possibly can in a minute.
In a minute. Oh boy. All right.
Okay, I have my timer here, so I don't go over because I'll be asking questions until you're like, is it time to stop?
All right. You got it.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
All right. Cake or pie?
Pie.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Favorite alcoholic drink?
Beer.
What's your favorite book when you were a child?
Treasure Island.
Android or Apple?
Apple.
Name your favorite food.
Beef bourguignon.
Marvel or DC?
Ooh, Marvel.
Popcorn or chips?
Popcorn.
Series or standalone?
Series.
Audiobook or bookish podcast?
Audiobook. I'm sorry. Audiobook.
It's okay. Vodka or rum?
Vodka.
If you could pick one superpower, what would it be?
Telekinesis.
What's your Starbucks order?
Tall cappuccino. Simple.
Ah,
Yeah.
time's up.
That's it?
That's it.
No way. Oh, man.
Yeah.
It flies.
Super easy.
I won, right?
I don't know. I guess you win. Actually, you know what? I bet if I counted, I think you probably have answered the most out of anyone because you were like about the business.
Yes. All right.
Yeah,
Good.
usually people try to throw commentary in even though they don't have to, and it just takes down their number.
Well, that's why I asked. I mean, if you can, yeah, yeah, you got to go with it. Awesome. Thanks. See, I learned things about myself there.
Yeah, cool. Very fun. Well, thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much again, Tamara, for putting this together.
Oh, my pleasure. So, yeah, if that's it, any last things you want to share before we sign off for the evening?
That is it. It's easy for people to find this book. Like I said, I hope they enjoy it. I hope they also enjoy my audiobooks. And I know I've said this a couple of times, but a really special thank you to you for doing what you do in this business, because there's those of us who, we make this content or we, record these books, but it's the bloggers and the reviewers and all of you guys who, to me, make this community complete. So thank you for taking an interest in all of this.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. So it's been great talking to you, and maybe we'll speak again sometime.
I hope so.
If you enjoyed today's book chat episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. You can follow me on Twitter at Shelf Addiction. Most importantly, you can share this podcast with friends and family that enjoy all things bookish, including author interviews. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.